I'm thrilled to be introducing an amazingly talented chef in our industry. Chef Shawn holds many business degrees and certificates in culinary arts, hospitality, tourism management, accounting, and professional sales. He has won numerous awards and worked in most aspects of the food service industry as a chef, teacher, manager, and consultant for both local and national restaurants, arenas, schools, hospitals, and hotels. Chef Shawn is currently a success coach for DM&A. Chef Shawn specializes in teaching and coaching individuals and groups, and he is the author of the First Timers Cookbook and the First Timers Bake Book. Chef Shawn is passionate about teaching and is an active mentor in the National High School Cooking Program, ProStart. Prior to joining DM&A as an executive success coach, Chef Shawn worked the industry-leading equipment manufacturers as a support chef, traveling across the country to assist everyone from local independent food service outlets to national restaurant chains with research, development, and general support. In addition, Chef Shawn has assisted in developing new food service concepts and in the turnaround of struggling operations. Please welcome Chef Shawn.
Like I need to be taller, right? So I appreciate the introduction. Some of it's true, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to talk. I was really hoping when they ask you when you want to speak, and you say, well, in the afternoon, of course, because by that time the sun's out, and people are antsy, and everybody's gone. But, so thanks for staying. It's really, really nice of you. It's going to really help me out. I might be picturing, well, never mind. One of the things I'm going to talk about today, we're talking about building brands, departments, your life. So in building brands, some of the things that I've done over the course of my career is help to build brands, regional and national restaurant chains. I've been able to support a lot of them. I've been able to work with some high-end places. And it's funny because people, when they get in this business, they get a little starstruck at times where maybe you're cooking for an athlete or a movie star or a musician or something, and people get a little bit awestruck. But one of the things I loved about food, getting into food, was that it's such a base level. It's such a common theme that we all have. We all have to eat. We all love to eat, most of us. Some of it shows more than others, but at times we all love to eat. So one of the things that I loved is when I first started in this business, I actually I wanted to start as an artist, of all things. In my high school, I had taken just about every art class that I could, and I was one of these like millennials before millennial was a cool thing to say. I was a millennial. I was like, I don't care. I would just want to do my own thing. And so I get in, and my high school guidance counselor says, you've taken every art class you can possibly take. Just why don't you go up to this vocational school? They've got classes up there. We'll pay for it, get high school credit, college credit. And I thought, okay, why not? So I'm looking through this course catalog, and I see culinary arts. So I'm like, oh, an art class. Awesome. So I see this class, and I'm like, oh, okay. I'm sure I'll be doing watermelon carvings and ice sculptures. Well, ice sculptures will probably be week or year 2 maybe. No, I should be good. So I get into the first day, and the instructor's like, okay, dinner for 200 people in about 6 hours. Go. And I thought, what did I get myself into? And I ended up being okay at it. Now, timing's everything. So this is 96, 97, and it's the year of the NBA lockout, the first one. And we had an arena locally. So our NBA basketball team there, all the cooks were supposed to start in October, but because there was this walkout, season wasn't starting until January. Well, guess what? Nobody stuck around waiting for the season to start. They all went and found other jobs. So basically the chef there says, if you can breathe, I will hire you. I don't care what skills you have or don't have, just show up. So I show up the first day, and I'm this overzealous, picture Chris Farley, I'm going to do that. And I get in there, and I'm like, okay, chef, what do you want me to do? And by this time, because I had to go after school, it's like 3 o'clock, we serve at 6, so pretty much everything's kind of wrapped up. And he's looking around like, here, mince up this duck. And he hands me this thing and walks away because it was obviously really important that I not mess it up. And so I get in there and I'm like, okay, I'm going to show him. Boom, cut the tip of my finger off. So I'm sitting there and I'm holding my hand and I'm like, oh, of all things that happened in my first like 2.5 minutes of being employed. So I look down at my hand, and by this time there's blood going down my hand. And it was gone. I mean, it was sitting there on the thing. So I'm like, okay, great. What do I do? And from across the kitchen, this big guy, Ron, goes, man, you cut your finger off. And he comes walking over, and I'm trying to be all like, oh, I don't want anybody to know. And he picks it up and throws it away, and it's like, Chef! So Chef comes over, and he's like, really? Come with me. So we go in his office and he bandages me up. Now, side story, he goes, I was pre-med. I'll bandage you up really nice. So what he does is he takes, the not the gauze, but the wrap, and he wraps my finger in it. So later that night, I was able to reopen my wound. Yeah. Pre-med my eye. So then he's like, okay, we're going to keep you away from the knives. Why don't you just take stuff out of the oven? So I'm like, all right, well, cool. I've obviously failed. So I go up and I'm pulling stuff out of the oven. But again, it's like, here comes overzealous teenager. I'm going to show the chef I'm the best. I didn't realize that these 4 great big turkey breasts he was cooking put off so much juice. I wasn't used to that. I haven't really worked in the kitchen before. Flip open the door and pull that thing out. Ah! So here I am, I go in the chef's office, and he's like, okay, great. I'm standing there with my shirt off, and he's dabbing me with cold towels, and I'm completely emasculated by that point. I'm standing there like, well, okay, this is my life now. And he wraps me in cellophane, literally takes it off, and is wrapping me with these cold towels on me. Put my coat back on, and he's like, why don't we take stuff out of boxes? So I'm, okay, chef, I'll do that. So I go over and I'm taking frozen chicken cordon bleus out and putting them on the sheet pans, just like, dun, 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 like, oh, this is the worst thing ever. So put them on there, and in the process of that, we had this guy, Big Bill, and he comes over, and we called him Big Bill because you couldn't really get around him, and he bumps the table, and there's just happens to be a knife there that goes tip down into my foot. Chef! So he literally goes, he just stands there and he's looking at me, and he's like, dude, you're not going to survive. Just go home. So as I'm sitting there and he's wrapping my foot, telling me all the reasons I shouldn't be in this business, I'm like, no, chef, I can do it. Just give me another chance. Give me another chance. Luckily, he did. I went back. He said, well, I'll give you another chance. Why don't you go home? You've lost a lot of blood. So I go home and, finger in the air on the bus, just big old bandage, and people are looking at me, and I'm thinking to myself, yep, I'm a cook. I'm really successful. And so the moral of that story is obviously if I can learn how to cook, anybody can. But I ended up spending the next 8 years with him. 8 years as his apprentice, and I traveled around. He took me to different properties, and we developed different concepts. And it was phenomenal. And had I not had that rocky start, I might not appreciate the knowledge and the experience that I gained over those next few years. But in those next few years, we were able to develop a lot of brands, and a lot of things I learned was universal. Didn't matter what concept of food service we were in, didn't matter what segment of the industry. There were these universal principles that I could apply not only to building a restaurant, building a brand, building a concept, but also building my life, building me as a person. So those are the things that we're going to talk about today. This is mine. So we're going to talk about the 3-part universal success principles that I have kind of learned to live by. First thing is, you got to have standards, right? Now, what are our standards? These standards are the values or the expectations that we have, either for ourselves, for our business, for our department, whatever it might be. We have to have something that we expect. What are our standards? After we have our standards, after we have those things that we expect or that who we are, we also have to have accountability. We have to have some way of living up to those standards. Now, accountability, these are going to be our measurable benchmarks. These are going to be the things that allow us to know how well we're meeting those standards or not. But we have to have that check and balance. We have our standard, how do we measure it? The hardest part of all of this, though, that makes people successful and separates, I would say, the men from the boys, but I'll just say the successful from the unsuccessful is consistency. And I think a lot of us can identify with this in this room because it's really fun, and I'll speak from personal experience, it's really fun to have a consultant come in and to talk to him and get excited and get the team excited and to be, okay, look at this cool stuff that they showed us and look at these measurable things that we can do to monitor ourselves. And 2 weeks later, we go on vacation, or somebody else goes on vacation, or somebody calls out sick, and the rubber meets the road and we kind of forget some of those things. That's why consistency is the hardest part. And I think all of us can identify with that. But if we learn how to set standards, how to keep ourselves accountable, and fight our natural human nature to be inconsistent and to take the easy way out, that's when we really see success. Now, what are our steps to achieving success? Our steps to achieving success are, first off, we got to figure out who we are. Not only who we are as individuals, but when we're developing concepts, brands, whatever it might be, we have to figure out what is it? What am I developing? If I'm developing a Greek concept, I probably want to look at what Greek ingredients there are. I probably want to look at different recipes and preparations. I probably want to maybe look at Greek olive oils and things of that nature. I need to do some homework on that. Now, this is going to determine the rest of our decisions, because once we know who we are, then we can work backwards. You have to have a picture in your mind of what you want to accomplish and what that looks like, and once you have that picture in your mind, then you can then work backwards. But until you have a clear picture in your mind of what you're going to accomplish or what you want it to be, it's very difficult to work backwards from that. But once you do, it's very easy. Now, here's something that I've learned over time really makes a big difference in making these decisions. First off, we have a belief. Once we have a belief, that belief, we have to know that there's potential with that belief. Once we know that there's potential with that, we have to take action to get to that point. And once we see results from our actions, guess what? It makes us believe even more. So that belief and that potential, which leads to action, makes us want to accomplish those results because we see results. But it takes that belief first and foremost. We have to believe that we can get there. Once we believe we can get there, everything else comes full circle. And it happens over and over again because everything reinforces itself. Now, apply this to yourself. How many of you actually believe in yourselves? And I'm not going to ask for show of hands because there's probably been times in my life where I would shoot my hand up and I'd say, I absolutely believe in myself. And then there'd be other times where I'd kind of be like, I mean, yeah. And then there's other times where I just keep my hand down completely, or I'd hide under the table or whatever. But we've all experienced those times in our lives where maybe something happens and we think that it's going to go one way and it goes something else, and it zigs when it should have zagged, and it's not fair. But at the end of the day, we got to come back to who am I, who do I want to be, what am I going to do? Now, when it comes to creating a concept or a brand, first off, we got to start with what's our menu. Once we know what our menu is, then that follows to our recipes. So we have our menu. We know what our offerings are going to be. Then we have to have, how do we get those things to be? How do we get the recipes to fit the menu? How do we get our ingredients and our preparation to fit those things that we want to do? It goes back to who we are, though, because if we're developing a fresh, healthy concept, chances are those ingredients and preparation are going to have to meet what a fresh, healthy concept is, not necessarily whatever's cheapest or whatever we have on hand. But a lot of that, again, depends on that first question: who are we? Now, step 2, what do we have to offer? So think about this first and foremost as you as an individual. What do you have to offer the world? Now, a lot of times you think about this in a setting with your employees, with your management teams, with your families, your spouse, your children. What do you have to offer the world? What do you give? Because we all have to give something. What are those things? Those are our unique abilities. What is my unique ability? What are the things I'm really good at? What are the things that I can bring to the world that maybe nobody else can? Once I know that, I have my belief. I've established my belief. But then you have to ask yourself another deep dive question. What do I actually offer the world, though? This is what I want to offer the world. This is what I have to offer the world. But what am I actually offering right now? Because I would venture to say that a lot of times that's different than what we're currently doing. I don't know anybody at this moment in time who's probably 100% reaching their potential. And I don't know if any of us in our lives ever fully reach our full potential. Because we're always learning, we're always growing, we're always making mistakes, and that's okay. But it's that belief that we're something more, and that we have more to offer, and that we have unique abilities that no one else has that can push us forward. So, the other question on the menu side is, what do we offer our guests? So if we're developing this healthy concept, if we're developing this system of things that we're offering to our guests that are going to heal them, that are going to taste good, that are going to help them have more energy to get throughout the day, what do we offer? Because there's intrinsic value. A lot of times I think, especially in food service, it's very easy to say, and I'll be honest with you, there was a time where the grass was greener for me, and I decided, this healthcare stuff, it's fun, but it's not really cutting edge. It's not really challenging me. I'm going to go back into restaurants. That's where it's at. That's where the notoriety is. That's where people are really focused, where you've seen cutting edge things. And guess what? I took a job with a wing chain. Talk about cutting edge, right? Nobody's seen that before. Nobody's done that. Talk about really helping people get diabetes. That's is what it is. Lesson learned. Grass isn't always greener. But on the menu side, what do we offer our guests? Our menu. Our menu is what we offer. Our menu shows what we have to offer. So we want to highlight our menu. We want to make sure that it flows. We want to make sure that it's attractive, that the descriptions are there, that we really sell the product, because the menu is selling this to our guests, to our customers, to our patients. Now, I want you to think about this. What is it that we offer our employees or our partners, our vendor partners, our administration partners? Because they're a pretty important part of what we do, right? Pretty important part. If our employees, whom we also serve, whom we also have to give things to, who we have to incentivize, we've got to have a reason for them to be there. We've got to have a mission, vision, values. We've got to have things for them to strive for also. Because if as individuals, we decide what we offer the world as individuals, what are our unique abilities, once we figure that out, we also have to develop others. We have to bring others across the finish line with us, because that's the mark of true leadership. It's not necessarily how well you can cook, or how amazing your recipes are. It's more about how is your team? What are you doing to help your team? What are you doing to develop your team? What are you doing to foster relationships with your vendor partners, like Nestle, who can help us, who can provide insights that maybe we don't have, or can provide support that maybe we don't have. You know, there's some opportunities there that a lot of times we think the guest, the guest, the guest, the guest, the guest. But as we serve our employees and our vendor partners and our administration, and we find out how we all come together, a lot of times things kind of come into play a little easier. A lot of times those approvals are a little easier to get. A lot of times getting those shifts covered are a little bit easier. And that in turn helps us run a much better department. So what does it come down to? It comes down to incentives. You've got to figure out, what is it that people want? What do my employees want? What do guests want? What does my administration want? What do the vendor partners need from me? Because as you ask those questions, it's a lot easier for people to kind of come in a line and join the team and push things forward. Then it's not just you. It's everybody working towards a common goal, a mission. That vision is getting accomplished now because everybody's on the same page and everybody's working towards it, and we all have incentives to do so. We can't fool ourselves and think that people don't need incentives or people don't need a reason to be there. If you give people a reason to be there and you find out what incentivizes them, I promise you, you get way more out of them than you ever would if you didn't. Now, step 3, how do we prepare? Now, coming back to the individual, you got to ask yourself how you prepare personally on a daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly basis. What are you doing every day to live up to your potential, to foster your unique abilities, to give back to the world, to be the person that you need to be to lead your team, or your brand, or your restaurant, or your department, whatever it might be? Are you taking time for yourself in the mornings? Are you continually educating yourselves? Most everybody in this room is absolutely trying and striving to be better than they are yesterday or the day before. And I applaud you for that, because it's very easy to say, okay, administration, I'm going to this conference in San Diego, and it's 3 o'clock on a Friday, and you know where I'm going with this. But instead you choose to be here, which means that you want to get something out of this because you want to move forward in your career, in your department, and yourself as an individual. And I applaud you for that. Now, one of the things that you can really help yourself to do this is establish yourself some goals. Now, we talk a lot about goals, and I'm not going to go into this real in depth. We could have a whole presentation on this, but what are your goals? And ask yourself that right now. What are my goals? And how am I working towards those? Am I setting goals? Am I writing them down? Because if you're not setting goals and you're not writing them down, and where are your benchmarks? If you establish your standards and you're trying to prepare for those and you're trying to set goals, where are your benchmarks? If you're not writing your goals down, you don't have personal benchmarks. Because without goals, without things you're striving for, you're throwing darts. You're shooting in the dark. Now you're not following up on anything. Now you're being a little bit more inconsistent. Now we just throw consistency out the window because we don't have anything to measure it by. We're just guessing. We're just kind of flying by the seat of our pants. So goals are very important as part of the preparation. Now, this applies to your department and not just you as an individual also, because if you're trying to incentivize your teams, if you're trying to incentivize your partners, whatever they might be, there's got to be benchmarks there too. They've got to understand what metrics you're going after. Everybody's got to be on the same team. Everybody's got to have a clear vision of where we're at. What are we doing? Once you have that, it's much easier to progress and move forward. Now, when it comes to your menu, you got to think through your preparation, your equipment. Now that I've got this menu, now that I know what my recipes are going to be and the ingredients, how am I going to prepare those? If I'm going for a healthier concept, I'm probably not going to be deep frying everything. But how do I get to that end result? If my end result is X, how do I get there? So you got to think, how does everything look? How does everything taste? What tools do you need to get to that point? And this is where helping to bring your team in on it really creates buy-in and creates incentives. In one of the chains that I've worked with them for a number of years, off and on. I always seem to go back because I just love people. And so when they say come back, even though I couldn't come back, I'm like, all right, I'll come back. And then I'm like, why did I say I could come back? But I always want to make sure that I help people, that I, kind of keep things going. So with this chain, it was so funny because the guy that I was working with at the time, he kept saying, you know what we should do to incentivize them? We should have this trip to Mexico. People would love that, right? It's like, well, yeah. Who doesn't love a trip to Mexico? Yeah, let's throw a trip to Mexico up there. And he's like, great, it's only for the GMs. Okay, well, why don't we see what the GMs think about that? So we go to the GMs, and they're like, yeah, I mean, that'd be cool. We'll go to Mexico. So that first year, we went to Mexico. And guess what? The next year, he's like, this is great. Those GMs are going to go back, and they're going to tell the other GMs that they have to perform. And once they know that they've got to perform, they're going to talk about how cool this trip was, and everyone's going to want to be there. Guess what happened that second year? First year, we had 5 GMs go. Second year, guess how many GMs went? 1. The whole corporate office staff went, though, because, boy, they sure worked hard. So there came a point in the evolution of this story that I took over that position. And when I took over that position, I just said, I've been in their shoes. I've been a GM. I've been a franchise owner. I've been a business owner. I know what it's like to be in their shoes. Why don't I just ask them what they want to do? So I went to them and I said, hey guys, what would be incentivizing to you? We got these goals. We got, we want to do some cool stuff. What do we need to do? And you know what they said? Do you think they said a trip to Mexico? No. The first thing they said was, we need something that's going to help our staff. We need something that's going to engage our staff. And it was so mind-blowing to everyone in the company that they said that. Well, why would they say that when we were taking them on these incredible trips to Mexico? And it's like, guys, you don't understand. What you don't understand is that when you work with people the way that we work with people, they become your family in a lot of ways. Everybody who works in our kitchens, we know a lot about them. Sometimes more than we want to, let's be honest. But when we know a lot about people and we spend more time with them on a daily basis and a weekly basis than we do our own family, they become our family. They become people that we care about, that we're interested in, and that we want to incentivize. And that was the piece that was missing. And once the GM spoke up and said, you know what would be really cool is if we hit our goals, if you would come cook for us in our restaurants. And I was like, that's not that big of a deal, guys. Like, I'll come do that. No. You don't understand. That's a huge deal because we don't get to see you that often, and we would love it if you just came in and cooked for us, and it would be a big deal, and we could even have like steak. I was like, hey man, if that's really what you're shooting for, like let's do it. And all of a sudden, it became this huge thing. So the previous year, the company had made $500,000 out of 10 corporate stores. And that was a big deal. When we started this new incentive program, we did our accounting in 13 periods, 13 yearly periods. So $500,000 in 13 yearly periods was a good thing. It was huge. Well, when we started this new incentive program, period 1 and period 2, we made almost $200,000 in 2 periods instead of 13. I mean, it was crazy. By the end of that year, we were close to $1 million, almost doubled what we had done the year previous, because we figured out what the incentives were, and it wasn't that big of a deal to us. It actually saved us quite a bit of money, but it wasn't up to us. It wasn't about going to Mexico and spending all this money on lavish vacations. It was about listening. It was about taking the time to say, what's important to you, and what can we do for you? And they loved it. They absolutely loved it, and it made all the difference in the world. So keep those things in mind when you're talking about how you prepare and how you incentivize. Is it takes time to listen. It takes time to get the feedback from people, other than just trying to shove something down their throat because you want it. What are your measurables when you're preparing? What are the metrics? And we've talked about that part. Now, step 4, how are we accountable? How are we accountable to our staffs, to our vendors, to our guests? Well, that's the first thing. We have to ask who we're accountable to. Well, I would dare say we are accountable to our employees, to our vendor partners, to our guests. We're accountable to all of them. Because guess what? A lot of times we make the decision whether an employee stays or goes. Does that affect them? Oh yeah, that affects them. Vendor partners, same thing. If we're getting subpar service, or we're getting products that don't live up to our standards, and we have to set someone free, where's Carlton? My man. Then that's on us. Now our guests are the same way. There's a lot of guests that we would love to set free, I'm sure. But we are accountable to them. And our patients, we're accountable to them because they are trusting in us to give them something they can't give themselves. And it's our opportunity to serve them. And we are accountable to them. So, what systems do we have to measure this accountability? Well, in a food service concept, we have production sheets. We have order guides. We have temperature charts. We have things that help us to be accountable. What's the hardest part about doing any of these, though? Consistency. There it is. So, it doesn't matter whether or not you, as a person, are building yourself. It doesn't matter whether or not you're building someone on your team. It doesn't matter if you're building your vendor partner list or your administration. What matters at the end of the day is how consistent you are. Now, I learned a very valuable lesson in being a franchisee. So I was a restaurant owner at one point. I don't recommend it, to be honest with you, unless you don't have to make money from it. If you can have a restaurant and you don't have to make money from it, it's the funnest thing in the world. But once you have to make money from it, oh man, woo! I hate it. But the great thing about being a restaurant owner is, you have all the things that you wanted. You have creative control, and you have the ability to do what you want when you want it. Yeah, right. How many of you have owned restaurants or owned some sort of food service outlet? Trick question, it owns you. Gotcha. So here's the thing that I learned about being in restaurants and being a restaurant owner was A, it's really hard. It's a lot harder than it looks. B, it's way more time consuming than it looks. And C, I learned to hate people being a restaurant owner. And it was the worst thing in the world. I didn't want that at all. I got into the restaurant and the hospitality business to be hospitable. But I started looking through this lens of like, oh, people, you want high quality, but you don't want to pay for it. And you want fast service, but you don't want to wait for it. What do you want? Just tell me what you want. Well, they're telling you what you want. Now it's up to me to figure out how to give it to them. And it was a challenge I thought I was up to, but I wasn't. I was young. I was in my early 20s, and I just, again, let's go back to Chris Farley. Got the world around my pocket and stuff it in. No, that was me. I thought I could do it. Weeks into it, months into it, years into it, it just started dragging on me. And luckily, we were at a time in the economy where I could sell it and I could be done with it. Kick it to the curb. It's for the birds. So then, 2 years later, knowing that I had learned from my mistakes, I bought a franchise because it was going to be totally different. And it was, because everything that I wanted, I now didn't have. I didn't have creative control. I didn't have the ability to make decisions. I worked for restaurant owners that didn't want to be restaurant owners. I had a family that I had gotten into business with, which was a really good idea. Mom and dad owned theaters. Brother number 1 was a real estate guy. Brother number 2 was a dentist. They didn't want to be in the restaurant business. They wanted to collect a check and they wanted to show up on Friday night and eat for free. They didn't want to be in the restaurant business, no matter how much they said that they did. Well, the fun thing about that was that they were losing about $24,000 a month when I stepped in to try to help them. Part of the reason that they were losing so much was that brother number 1, the real estate guy, had said, you know, I'm going to run this thing and I'm going to do a great job, so I'm going to pay myself $100,000 a year. So he was making more money running one restaurant than the CEO of the company was making running all of them. And guess what? It kind of strapped him for cash. So they struggled on that aspect. The other part was they didn't want to get involved in operations. They wanted to go out and do marketing. Well, guess what? You go out and you do marketing and you say, come into my restaurant, it's great, food's awesome. But behind, if you looked over your shoulder, you'd know that the building is burning down. Did you see your building's burning down? Oh, come on in and eat. Well, you can't get food out on time, you can't get the right products ordered, nobody shows up for work, and so half the time that rice that you're out there toting as the best cilantro lime rice ever, turns out that it's like subpar, and sometimes it just happens to be like parsley rice or parsley grapefruit rice, which I do not recommend, please. Oh. Yeah, it turned out to be not so hot and not such a good idea. But they didn't know that because they had these blinders on and they wanted to have a restaurant. And my restaurant's going to be the best and I want to do the marketing. But they didn't want to get involved in operations. They didn't want to incentivize employees. They didn't want to do any of that. So here I come. Chris Farley's back on it. He jumps in. I jump in there and I'm like, okay, we're going to turn this thing around. And we did. We went from negative 24,000 to negative 5,000 to making 5,000. And it was awesome. And then they sold it. So one day I came into work and the guy who just happened to own all the Subways in the area walks in. I knew him. He was a regular. Came in and ate all the time. Said, man, I love this restaurant. Can't wait for you to work for me. And I went, huh? I said, you know, I had 25% ownership in this restaurant. And he said, well, not really. Signed the dotted line. You now work for me. And I said, no, I don't. And he said, no, please work for me. You can run all my Subways. You can. And at that point, I just kind of clicked. Something clicked in my head, and I said, I don't want to do this. I put my heart and soul into this, and I just can't do it. So, twice I had failed. I had had my own place, and yes, we were able to sell it and get out from underneath it. That wasn't our end goal, though. We wanted to make money. We didn't want to just break even. Now I had this franchise, and I had failed at that too. And I thought, golly, food service just isn't for me. You know, maybe Chef was right when I was 15, 16 years old. I need to get out of this. I should have been done a long time ago. So I tried to. We moved, went back to where my parents lived and said, okay, I'm going to give up. I'm going to go into real estate. I'm going to get my appraiser license. I'm going to get my real estate license. And so I went to real estate school. And as I was in real estate school, for some reason, I just could not pass the stupid real estate exam. I knew all the answers, but I couldn't pass it. So I took it like 4 times because you have to take an exam before you take an exam. It's weird. So I couldn't pass it. So I thought, well, I've still got my appraisal stuff. I can focus on that. So I get into the appraisal school and I do really well and I finish all the tests on time. And then I come to find out that to be an appraiser, you have to have somebody mentor you after you take all these classes. Well, guess what? Nobody wants to mentor you because you become their competition. Well, good night. No one tells you that, but when you sign up for the classes, talk about a bait and switch. So, one of the frustrating things about all that was I was like, well, I'm not meant for food service, obviously, because I failed. And I'm not meant for real estate because I can't even get licensed. So what am I supposed to do? So at the time, my mentor, the guy who owned a piece of my finger and had gotten to know me intimately on my first day of work, shows up and says, you know, I'm doing these restaurant inspections and it's really wearing on me. I could use your help. Show up, fill out this form, make sure everything's clean, and I'll give you $100 for everyone. And so I was like, all right, well, everything else is falling down around me. Might as well go do this. Let me go see what I can do. So I go in, I do these inspections, and with every inspection, I got a little bit more passionate about it. I got a little bit more like, no, this is really what I want to do. This is kind of what I want to stick with. So I get in there, and I'm sticking with it, and I'm doing a little bit better, and I'm learning, and I'm now a little bit more humble. And then I thought, I love this. I love being able to come in and teach people how to do these things. And then it was like, bingo. The lights went on, and I said, I want to teach. So I went and got a job as a chef instructor. And it was great. Worked there for 2 years, and then had my moral compass blew up because I was working for a for-profit culinary school, charging $100,000 for a culinary education that they were going to get out and make $10 an hour. And I said, not so much. So I decided that I would go out on my own, and I started getting consulting, and that was great. And that led me to my home now. So one of the things that I realized after going through all these life lessons, after applying all these principles, was that at the end of the day, what I did consistently was really what I became. I was able to fail. I was able to fall on my face. I was able to go through all these experiences, and at the end of the day, come back to where I really belonged. It's not what we do once in a while that shapes our lives, it's what we do consistently. Now, I had to throw a Tony Robbins quote in there, right? You guys were expecting it, I know, because this is kind of Tony Robbins-esque. But one of the things that really inspires me about this is that if I had given up at the point in my life where I felt like things were falling apart, everything would have fallen apart. I would have moved on to something else. I was just one step away from what I really wanted to do. And I think that there are people out there right now that are sitting here looking up at me thinking, this could be me, or this has been me, or I don't want that to be me. So just think about this for a second. What are your standards? Do you have high standards? Do you have low standards? Do you have mid-range standards? It doesn't matter what your standards are, but they need to be your standards, and you need to stand by them. You need to keep yourself accountable to those standards. And once you keep yourself accountable to those standards consistently, then you're going to start to see miracles happen in your life. You're going to start to see things happen where doors open, or a door closes and a window opens, or opportunities that you thought were yours and that you had to have that all of a sudden go away and better ones show up. That happens. So keep this in mind when you're on the cusp of greatness, because I know that most of you are. You might not see it, but you are. There's something coming your way that if you strive for it, if you set your goals and your visions for it, and you focus on that, and you do the hard work necessary, and you avoid the avalanche zones, you can absolutely get there. Anybody ever read the book by Reinhold Messner? He's a very famous mountain climber. He's the only guy to actually summit all the highest peaks in the world without oxygen. He had some times in his life where things fell apart. There was a point in his life where he was climbing. Anybody see the movie Everest? He's one of those guys. His brother died mountain climbing. And he vowed to himself that he was, every mountain he climbed, he was going to avoid the avalanche zones. Even if it meant going twice as far up harder paths, he was always going to avoid the avalanche zones because it wasn't worth the risk. So what I would say to you is, if you have goals, if you have aspirations, if you have things you're striving for, strive for them, but avoid the avalanche zones. What are our avalanche zones? If we're trying to create the ideal department or restaurant concept or person, what are our avalanche zones? If I want to get up early and exercise, then don't wake up and get on your phone for 30 minutes and then realize you got to jump in the shower before you're going to be late to work. If you really, really want to have an ideal department, then make sure you're setting goals with your staff to make sure that they're on board and make sure that they're striving towards those same things that can help you also. You know, we all have avalanche zones and we all know what they are because they're all individual, but you have to avoid those. You have to have your standards, you have to be accountable, you have to be consistent, but you have to avoid those avalanche zones because those are what can truly take you off your path. Now, the last thing I want to say is that in the last couple years, I've had some realizations in my life. And some of those realizations have been hard, and some of them have been not so hard. They've been things that like, oh, I knew that all the time. But I didn't know it till I know it. Once I knew it, I knew it. There's a few of you out there who are like, this guy is off his rocker. There's other of you that are like, okay, I get it. I've had those. My aha moments where I knew it all along, I just didn't know I knew it. I've had a lot of those the last couple of years, and that's one of the opportunities that I've taken in self-reflection is to realize that the answers, most of the time, they reside right here. It's getting out of my own way. It's stepping out of my comfort zone. It's realizing that I can dream bigger than I want to dream or that I've wanted to dream in the past. But once you start dreaming bigger, once you start setting higher standards, and once you start reaching those goals, again, that belief turns into the potential, turns into action, turns into achievement, turns into that belief again. We have to believe to be able to achieve, and that's what it starts at. All of us have greatness in us. We just have to believe it. And once we believe it, and once we hold ourselves accountable to it, then we can accomplish those things. I'm grateful to have been up here for just a brief moment with you, and I look forward to the possibility of meeting all of you because I really do love people. Thank you.